in the country
yeah.
for the short time.
Yeah, but maybe not in the next 1 year or so.
Yeah, I think so.
And it's because some countries are very advanced with the vaccine and it's easy to travel, but some others are not. So is that the only problem is that period when you have to quarantine, which
I
is,
think so, yeah.
I don't know, here is 10 or 14 days, which is quite a lot.
Yes, quite a lot.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
So we would like to introduce,
hopefully,
we would like to introduce Professor Aniati. She's our senior professor in our faculty.
Oh, so, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Welcome to Science Center.
Her area is in the image processing and pattern recognition.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah, nice topic.
I think we have been working very lots and with our colleague from the Faculty of Medicine and also the hospital.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. We should think, well, after the talk maybe, or at some other point, maybe we can
think so,
various ways in which we could collaborate. Then we should also look for some funding opportunities.
Yeah, right.
We have some programs here, and I had a grant. Well, actually, the data I will talk about today was collected via that grant with Malaysia. But it's via a program which is for all other countries to collaborate with the UK, and it's not just universities. It includes SMEs, and we had I think we were about 6 partners from the UK and Malaysia. So there are funding opportunities, and will be worth exploring.
Yeah.
Any avenues.
I'm still supervising one PhD student. We are working on the predicting for bank or organization bankruptcy. Maybe maybe it will relate to your area about the prediction of bankruptcy.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, in fact, I had he wasn't my student, but he was in business in Brunel, and he did something on risk assessment.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was not CEO, but something with a managerial role in a bank, and he wanted to do an MBA. Just so that he knows better, or I don't know, he wanted to learn more things. And he approached me for an AI perspective. So he told me problems he had in banks, in his bank, and he asked me for AI solutions to that, which was quite an interesting talk. I've learned a lot of things. And in fact, well, the talk today is about a different kind of data. From rehabilitation, but I usually keep on saying, well, machine learning is not something that is fixed to a field.
Yeah, right.
Machine learning is fixed maybe to data, or machine learning algorithms are fixed to some types of data, and that type of data can come from anywhere.
From anywhere, right.
It's just the way you interpret it.
Yeah, right.
A time series data could mean something in finance, and could mean something else in rehabilitation, and could mean something else in another field. But in fact, machine learning is a time series data. So you work with the same algorithm, same metrics, because it's a time series data. So that's the fact that makes the machine learning so applicable to so many.
To any area, right? So there are about 33 attendees so far. But Pak Hari, shall we start now?
Yeah, we can start now. Prof. Heru, maybe I would like to start the session first. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning to Dr. Crina Grosan as the speaker of the event today. And also good afternoon to Prof. Heru Suhartanto, Prof. Aniati Murni, and also all participants on Zoom and also on YouTube. Welcome to our event supporting of international accreditation and academic reputation enhancement, entitled Faculty of Computer Science Research Month, supported by Universitas Indonesia. And in this event, we invite experts around the world to share their research and also scientific writing experience. And this event will also relate with our conference program in this year, ICAXIS and IWIS 2021. We have successfully invited Prof. Akinori Nishihara from Tokyo Institute of Technology, Prof. Tsukasa Hirashima from Hiroshima University, Dr. Martin Schrep from SAP AG Germany, Dr. Hendrik Skibe from Japan, Dr. Faris Darari from Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Puturi Handayani also from Universitas Indonesia, and Dr. Wahyu Kaisarendra from University Brunei Darussalam, and also Dr. Mahardika Pratama from Nanyang Technological University. And for today, Dr. Crina Grosan will share her research with us. And without further ado, I would like to give the time to Prof. Heru Suhartanto as our moderator to moderate our event.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillah, Assalamualaikum, and good morning and good afternoon. It's our pleasure to have Dr. Crina Grosan as our speaker today, which is the follow-up for our meeting a few weeks ago. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll have a good collaboration with Dr. Crina and her colleagues at Brunel University. And just a short introduction for Dr. Crina. She's a senior lecturer in the Department of Computer Science at Brunel University. And prior to this, she was also a lecturer and research fellow in the same department. And before that, she is also academic member of the Babis Polya University, Club Napucha, one of the top university in Romania. Sorry for my spelling.
Very good, actually.
Okay. And she's received her BSc in Mathematics, the same with me. I also have BSc in Mathematics and also Computer Science, and also her Master of Science in Compact Analysis, Optimization, and her PhD in Artificial Intelligence. And also she has some interest, which is spanned from the areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and optimization, and also includes both theoretical algorithm. And without further ado, so we'd like to please Dr. Crina Grosan to present your talks on spatio-temporal pattern in human activity assessment. Please do so.
Thank you so much. Well, that was very good. I don't have to say anything now because everything. Let me try to share the slides. Hopefully you can you see the screen?
Yes, yeah, right.
Okay, I will just do it.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the intro. Indeed, we met for, there was a kind of a seminar or webinar between Brunel and Universitas Indonesia. And that's where we, in a breakout room, we figure out we have some common interests and would be great to explore and exploit them. So we decided to go on with the talk, just presenting some of my research directions, but there's some of my research directions, as I said. And then we look from there on how we can continue and have a longer and long-lasting collaboration. So today I'm just going to talk about some of my recent research. It's based on one project, as I said, in collaboration with Malaysia. But this is just part of the things I'm doing. It's mostly applied, but I also work on development of machine learning models. Now, development maybe is a bit too much because there are so many good algorithms up there. So maybe I would say just improvement of the existing ones, or trying to do various ways to hybridize them or to make the existing ones better or work better. But there's lots going on there. So I call it spatio-temporal data because it's data that is, now there are various kinds of data that could be spatio-temporal, but as long as it has these two dimensions being time and space, this kind of human movement data is also considered as being spatio-temporal. We'll give you details about that in a minute. So human activity assessment is assessment of the quality of any movement that subjects. I would say humans, but I would say subjects because they include both people with some disabilities and people with no disabilities, performing certain activities. And I will go into detail about that. Now, why I'm working on this, as I said, we had this project, and I like to put this graph up here, although it's an old one. I couldn't find one which is really accurate or up to date. Is a study that says if we live long enough, nearly all of us will have a disability. Now, you can live with that disability, or you can try to improve it, or you can try to prevent having a disability, or not just to prevent, but delay it. And I'm saying this will happen if we live long enough, and we might get a disability later in life. We can still work towards delaying that, the onset of that. And there are various ways of people various ways of technology, let's say, to deal or to help improve the life of disabled people. One is these assistive technologies, and is wheelchairs, wearable technologies, prosthetics, and so on. The other one is adaptive technologies, items or things that can help people with a disability to deal better with various things like magnifying lenses, car with hands controls, adapted keyboards, and so on. And then is this rehabilitation technologies that include all kinds of functional electrical stimulations and all kinds of devices that could be inserted in the human body, but also the software that helps with improving the life of these disabled people. And this is the area my talk will be on. So is in software rehabilitation technologies for improving the life of disabled people. Now, why we want to do this? Well, there are various benefits. If you think you have a software at home that can help you do rehabilitation exercises or exercising while you're having a certain condition, that will be really beneficial because you don't have to have a physiotherapist. At least in the UK, the number of existing physiotherapists and the demand is really, or the ratio, I would say, is really high. Because there are so many people who want to do a rehabilitation, but there are not many physiotherapists available, at least by no means in a one-to-one basis, unless you maybe pay lots of money to get access to that. So if you have at home, you don't need a physiotherapist because they design some exercises for you. And this is closing the care and quality gap, because you still get a good quality rehabilitation session, and you do it in your own environment. It helps with closing the finance and efficiency gap, because, as I said, you don't have to travel to hospital or some centers that do that. You don't have to be in a hospital, or you don't have to pay for being in a hospital or in a rehabilitation center. You can do it at home. So besides helping with people who have to travel or be hospitalized or being in a rehab center, it could also be used for preventing getting to such a condition. And some of the technologies we use here are used in some care centers or in these care homes where you keep elder people. They're not necessarily there because they have a disability, but they might be there because they then don't have anyone to care for them. So in order to keep them active, or even not in these care homes, but somewhere at home, in order to keep them healthy and active for longer, they could also use this software rehabilitation extra games, I will call them. They're not just for rehabilitation. They just make you move, basically. They make you exercise in a way which is fun, because you pretend you play a game rather than thinking that you're exercising. So what I'm going to discuss today is 2 ideas. And I will use this term, you'll see action or gesture or movement. It basically denotes the same thing, at least in my talk today. So I will refer to the movement somebody is doing by either gesture or action or movement. So first idea will be about machine learning for action correctness, how correctly a certain action or certain movement has been executed. And the second thing will be machine learning for game performance assessment. And game performance again means a subject is playing a virtual reality game and then gets a score at the end, or gets some assessment at the end. And then we want to predict from the performance on the game the assessment. I'm going to show you 2 types of data we collected for each of these problems, because they have been recorded in various environments. So this one you see is an EXA game, and you see the subject is moving. In this case, is a front flexion of the left hand. So he's moving this hand, and by the way he's moving, he's interacting with the environment. And that virtual reality environment is a game played. So it moves the hand, and I will just play it again and then get into details of what we get. So we'll play a game, and while playing a game is actually moving or repeating a movement on, so he's repeating a certain movement. This is another video. So the interaction is done with via a sensor motion camera. We use a camera for all this because we use a platform which is designed by an SME. So we've used that platform, and you see on top of the TV is a sensor motion camera that records the video. And you will see in the in this screen, for instance, you see it gets the the body, and then it gets the skeleton points of the body that is moving. So basically what we get from the video is the skeleton points that are moving. That are changing their position in time. So this is one type of data we have. So the patients are playing EXA games. Now there is another type of data we collect, and that is a single gesture. So there is this avatar which has been designed by a physiotherapist to show a certain movement, and then the patient or the subject has to do the same movement that has been shown by the avatar. So in this case, it's not playing a game, it's a single gesture that is repeated. While playing a game, you saw the front, the arm is flexed forward or backwards, but it might not be fully flexed. So it might be just half, depending on what the game requires. But in this case, in the second case, is a certain action that is repeated. Now, I'm going to talk first about this action that is repeated, and the way we look at them is to see whether an action or that action is correctly executed or not. And you see here some images with or the skeleton images of a subject doing this action when they have to raise the hands above the head and then lower them back up to the shoulder level. So you can see in one of the image, the subject is lowering the arms too much, because the elbow level is much below the shoulder level. So one of the actions is correctly executed and the other one is not. Now here is very clear and it's kind of simple, but there are another actions. For instance, this one, standing active straight leg raise, when the action is more complex. So it's not just raising the leg, but it has to, the subject has to keep a straight posture, to not move, to not compensate in a way or another. So in this way, describing just by describing whether the action is correctly executed or not, just by looking at some skeleton points, whether the position is going too much down or so, is a bit too tricky. So as I said, some of these problems are more challenging than the other, or some of the gestures are more challenging than the other. So I'm going to talk first about this action correction, and then we'll move back to the game assessment. So when patients are playing a game. When is a gesture correctly executed or not? Sounds like a binary problem, isn't it? You just say 0, 1, is it correctly executed or not? But in fact, it's slightly more complex than that. It's similar to gesture or action recognition. So it's kind of similar problem. The data is basically the same. It's just what you do with the data. But you have to, so besides saying whether a gesture is correctly executed or not, you need to kind of identify the gesture first, especially if you have multiple gestures and multiple subjects executing that. So it's not just yes or no, it's more like a combination of things you need to do there. And that makes the problem very complex. And there is very little research. I mean, recently it started to be more research in this area and some data sets available. But up to a couple of years ago, there wasn't much research or even data available. But now, as I said, there are a few data sets available, and we've also in a process of publishing our data sets. So there will be at least 3 data sets available for anyone wanting to test their algorithms on. Now, the data we get has been captured, as I said, using that platform, that software platform, and the Kinect camera. We use the Kinect. It's disconnected now, but they have a replacement for that. So it's even more, much better and less noisy than the one we used. So we captured the videos. We then taken the 3D skeleton out of these images. And then the 3D skeleton has, I'm saying 3D skeleton because the skeleton has 25 points. Maybe not all of them are relevant because some will be not moving at all. But each skeleton point has 3 dimensions, X, Y, Z, because it's the spatial coordinates. We've got the data for various gestures, and I'm going to show them in another slide. And we had various sessions. The data has been recorded in a rehab center. So all of the patients included here had a disability or had a problem. And we had 37 recording sessions. And have one of my postdocs working in this project went and basically stayed for 1 month to collect the data because it wasn't that easy. And you can't ask the patients to have, I mean, you can ask them for sessions, but sometimes they won't be able to do because they won't feel well one day. So you need to wait and adapt to daytime. It was nearly 5 hours of video recordings that was finally good to use. And 30 GBs of raw data. We had some other data collected which we couldn't use, but the one that we processed further was this nearly 5 hours of data. We had 29 participants, out of which 15 were patients. And then we had healthy individuals, they were mostly physiotherapy, so they knew the gestures they want to represent, and they were asked to execute both correct and incorrect versions of a gesture. For the patients, we didn't ask them to do correct or incorrect, they were just doing their best. So some of them were correct, some of them were incorrect. Now, we had 9 gestures. Some of them were recording sitting because that was the condition of the subject. So they couldn't stand and they had to be sitting. And then we had both upper limbs and lower limbs involved in movements. And overall, we processed the things and we've got nearly 2,000 files. So, nearly 2,600 files. And this file means movement. These are the gestures we had. So was elbow flexion. You just saw. You saw the front flexion. So there is elbow flexion, right or left. The right or left refers to the arm used. Shoulder flexion right, shoulder abduction, side tap left or right using the lower limbs, and so on. So these were the gestures recorded. Now, this is the patient information, actually, not the healthy ones. It's just the patient information and what problems they have. So you see some of them had stroke, some of them had spinal cord injury, brain injury, some of them because they had car accidents. They had all kinds of injuries affecting some sides of their body. So you can see they had lower body affected, which means they were paralyzed from waist onwards. They had only left or right side affected, or only upper or only lower limb affected, or so. So it was a variety of affections. It was very difficult to find some that were really having exactly the same problem, let's say, so that will be easier to compare them. Age was between 24 and 70. That is important, maybe not in the analysis we've done, because this is the way they execute a gesture correctly or not, but it's important in the recovery. If we follow them in time, then some of them will do better as they keep on exercising. And this is how a data instance looks like. So we recorded with this Kinect 30 frames per second. And the videos were really varying because some of them were executing a gesture slower and some were really faster. Now, again, depends on their condition. So the frequency of the frames per second was the same, 30 frames per second, but the number of frames we recorded was completely different, not just between patients because they've executed at different speed rates, but also between, also among, even for the same patient, the videos were not of the same length because sometimes they did faster, sometimes they did slower. The only thing that was equal was the frame length, which was 75. And that again was because we have 25 skeleton points and each skeleton point has 3 coordinates. So a frame has the size 75 and we have n frames with variable values for this n. And this is, you see the data, how it looks like. We have the identifier on the last by one column, which is the patient ID, and the class on the last column, which says whether a gesture is correctly executed or not. We annotated the video, so we looked at the videos, so it's self-annotated with the physiotherapist whether the actions are correct or not. So you see F74 there because we start from 0 to 75. Now, the distribution of the data for the gestures was slightly towards correct gestures. So we had more correct gestures compared to incorrect gestures for each of them. And it's also same when we go for the patients. So when we looked at this, we formulated various questions and various research hypotheses to investigate. Now, I mentioned that the videos recorded were of different lengths. Now, if you use any machine learning method, they need the data of the same input size. So this was one of the challenges, to make the data of the same input size. Obviously, then to identify the best machine learning method to do the classification, which was just investigating existing methods and eventually improving them. And then after we looked at the data and we applied some initial algorithms, we realized that the fact that our data is unbalanced, because it was highly unbalanced with correct versus incorrect classes, we realized that if we get more data, that could balance a bit the classes. But it's difficult to get more data because we need to go back to maybe the same set of patients and ask them to do repeat the gestures, but they're no longer in the rehab because they only stayed there for 6 months. So, or some of them may no longer be in the rehab. So we looked at the ways to augment the data or create artificial instances. And I'm only going to report the results we've got with the data augmentation, because before the augmentation, the results were not that good. Now, we looked at ways to pre-process the input. And by pre-processing means we wanted to make to bring the input data kind of towards the same size. And there are various ways you could do that. Obviously, this requires changing the data. Upsampling. So if the video was too small, we could make it longer by either using zero padding, you complete with 0 values till the end, or you find a linear representation or any other curve in the data and you insert points on that. and so on. So there are various ways in which you can add additional data, additional data points. Now, some that are too long, because we've opted for some, well, we had various experiments with elongating all of them to the longest one, or finding something in the middle, or finding something around the mean value of the videos and so on. But in whichever case we consider, we had to upsampling to do upsampling for some of them and downsampling for other ones. So downsampling means, again, you remove some points. So whenever you have points that are too close, maybe, or some other technique, you can remove them. We've used even this windowing technique. You go through the data with a window. And we also created some additional points. We came up with this method of creating additional points based on the trajectory. So we tried to look at, to find a function, a mathematical function that will give the trajectory of the movement. So given this is the trajectory, you identify the trajectory, the mathematical formula, and then you add some points on that trajectory. But again, we need to find the right one, or the most appropriate one to do that. We then looked at machine learning methods to apply. So we had the data, everything on the same side. We looked at methods to apply. And we first, I first asked some students to play with the existing methods, and they started with the simple ones, simple vector machine, neural networks, other boost, all this kind. We tried about 10 algorithms. I haven't put the table up here because the results were not that good. So I can't remember now the best one, but they were all around 50 to 60%, which means nearly random. So there was not really, none of them was really very good on its own. So we then look, and what people do these days, you look at the best approaches applied for similar data. So since the data is similar to gesture recognition, we looked at what was best for gesture recognition data. And some of the methods that are mostly used are CNNs and RNNs. And among RNNs, we went for long short-term memory. We tried and we played with various types of architectures for CNNs, with decreasing the number of filters, the batch size, all the hyperparameters, playing with them. And we used filter sizes of either 1 dimension or 3 dimensions. And why we did that? Well, because our data is a time series and it has 3 coordinates, it will only make sense to look either at a point or at 3 points, which will be the 3 coordinates. So apart from that, other filter sizes didn't work well. And the best one, I think, was the 1 by 1. So we did experiments with these filter sizes, but the best one, I think, was 1 by 1. Another method we looked at and we got good results with was rough path theory. And I will mention in a minute what that means. And this rough path theory finds a signature in the data. And then based on that signature it found, it applies some of the common algorithms to do the classification. So we used rough path theory with, I don't know, 9 or 10 existing algorithms, AdaBoost, K-nearest network, neural networks, and so on. Decision trees, random forest, and so on. When we've done the augmentation, which was the last thing the last idea, we looked at, again, at various methods for doing this augmentation. Augmentation means, well, creating artificial instances from the real ones you already have. So you just alter them a bit, but they should be still valid. So what we tried to do was, I don't know, we had a gesture for the right hand and we tried to rotate it to have it for the left hand, or things like that. So, or scaling the data or permutating the data or so on. So there were various techniques we used. I think rotation was one of those who gave us valid data, or data that was of high validity. And this is how they look like. So you get original data, and there are 3 ways in which the data is transformed. it looks very much similar to the original one, but it has some slight alterations here and there. Now we had to identify an evaluation protocol. So we used cross-subject evaluation, which means we train on a number of subjects and we test on one. We use just one for testing, but for that one we test, we never included any data in the training phase. So when it came to test, it was a completely different patient from the one seen in the training. And we wanted to do that just to imitate a real world scenario, because you have an algorithm that works for the patients you have. And then when a new patient comes, you want to apply the algorithm you have. So we've done that. Obviously, we used cross-validation. We repeated the tests many times, and we always averaged the results. The convolutional neural networks, we used, we tested with various filter sizes, with various numbers of filters, with pooling layers. I think we finally used max pooling, dropout, and so on. And this was the architecture we finally went on with. Again, as I said, it was based on some trial and error. Maybe we could have done better if we tested more, but this was one we stopped with, and we were happy with the results we've got. So it had one deconvolution layer followed by max pooling, another one deconvolution followed by a max pooling, and then another one followed by max pooling. Then 6 fully connected layers of 256, 128, 64. Every time it was just going into half, a dropout layer, and then in the end we had a classifying layer into T classes. We used long short-term memory as well, because the data is time series and is kind of the time points are kind of connected, so you can't be there at time point T before being in another position at another time point previous to that. So we thought it might be appropriate for our data. We used sequence lengths of size 28, which was the number of frames in the shortest session data recorded. We fed the data into batches in LSTM cells, and the size of each batch was 3 times the sequence length. And we used 3 layers. So our LSTM was 3 layers. And now this rough theory, as I said, is a method that extracts a unique feature vector. So it looks at the data, and it, regardless of the length of the time series, will extract some signature or something that is particular to that time series. And based on that signature, we'll be able to classify the data, because it's a unique pattern in that sequence. So if you look at the frames that are here, so we computed 25 signatures for each of the joints separately. And we, in the end, we concatenated, or we put together the signatures into one long vector for the entire clip. So we tried to find something particular for each joint, and then put them together for all the 25 joints, and there was the signature of that particular movement. And based on that signature, you apply all the existing algorithms like decision forest, neural networks, supervector machine, and so on, to classify your data. And now when we get to the results, this is what we go for each gesture and for each of the methods we've used. So you see that some of the algorithms got very good results for some gestures, but not for others. And you see, because I will also show in another slide, that some of the methods really got 100% accuracy for some of the gestures. Not for all of them, but there are some gestures for which we could get very high accuracy. And I'm just going to present the results for each of them. So for CNNs, the overall, let's say, for rough path method, the k-nearest neighbor classifier with 15 neighbors outperformed the rest of the classifier in 7 out of the 9 gestures. Average accuracy was 96.74 in gesture 7. And accuracy across all the gestures was 94.67. The overall accuracy for CNNs for all the gestures was 85.24. And the highest accuracy in gesture 0 with 92%, the lowest in gesture 1 with 74%. If you look at gesture level, if you look at particular subjects and particular gestures, so at subject level, if you look at just, we go 100% for 7 subjects for several subjects for multiple gestures. So for instance, gesture 3 and gesture 6, the accuracy was 100% for 70 subjects. But we've got 11% accuracy, which is really, really very bad for 1 subject in gesture 7. So even though it got 100% for some subjects and some gestures, there were also some, there was this one subject for which the performance was very bad. The average accuracy for LSTM across all gestures was 85.63, but again, they go in gesture 3, for instance, 89.6, and lowest in gesture 8 with 83%. Now, the lowest, again, if you look at subject level, the lowest accuracy was obtained for gesture 3 for a large number of patients, the lowest point was for a subject in gesture 8 with 16%. So if you look overall, all subjects, all gestures, we've got quite good results. But there were some particular subjects, particular gestures for which the classification was really very bad. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of work that could be done to improve it. Maybe we could look at these particular gestures or particular subjects that perform worse. The fact is that the subjects or the gestures for which some methods performed not well were not the same. So we couldn't generalize that, okay, for gesture 3, all the methods work below the standard, or for patient X, all the methods obtain very bad results, because it wasn't the case. So it was different patients and different methods that worked or didn't get very good results. Now, as I said, there are ways in which we could improve on the methods. We could also add more data, maybe. We could look into that. But yeah, overall, there could still be work done with this. And as I said, this is just one data set, is our data set, but there are at least 2 other data sets available on the literature. We tried with all of them before we did with our own. I think the only difference between our data set and the 2 other existing ones, exactly for the same problem, is that the data they've collected is from healthy participants. So the healthy participants were instructed to execute correct and incorrect gestures, while in our case, it came naturally, at least for the patients, to do the way they could do. The second part, excuse me, of my talk will be on data collected for playing games. Now you see an exact game here, but there are several, and the platform we had has, I think, over 200 games. We haven't tried all of them. We just experienced with a number of them. So it's again the same thing. The data extracts, the video records the data, and we extract the skeleton from the data. So it's absolutely exactly the same data as we said before. It's just that the meaning is slightly different, because instead of just executing a single thing, in this case, it's playing a game. So it might be doing just half of a gesture, or not complete gestures. And we're not interested in complete gestures. We don't want to see how many complete gestures they execute. We just want to see what pattern they followed in the game, and how is that associated with the overall assessment of the game by physiotherapists, or by the points they collected or whatever. So in this case, the data has been collected from a set of patients that have been recruited for this project. So initially we recruited 30 patients and 30 controls. Controls means they were still patients, but they were not going telerehabilitation. They were just going for the classical physiotherapy. So they all went, I think, 2 months of rehabilitation. In the end, out of the 30 patients, only 13 had data collected that was good for analysis. Some of them didn't have enough sessions, or they gave up, or they were not. So we only had 13 patients in the end. But these 13 patients played 2,661 EXE games, as I said, over this period of time. Now, the patient conditions in this case was only affected by hemiparesis, I think, 2 types of hemiparesis and stroke. So compared to the other cohort we had, this data was more from patients of the same kind. But again, they were affected in various ways. So some were affected, the conditions was worse than for the others. Now you see the EXE game name here, won't tell you anything maybe. It's just as is, it is called, the game you saw is called Easy the Bee. So it's one of the games you see here. The one you saw in the video. Again, we have the patient ID and we have the number of games played by each patient of each type. And you see they've tried various games. So it wasn't that they played only a single game every day. They could play various games. Now, a session is normally 3 minutes, but it can last longer or shorter. Well, sometimes it's shorter because they stopped it or they couldn't do. And again, as I said, their condition wasn't really that they could play a whole game. So maybe it was, especially initially when they start playing, maybe they couldn't move that well. So they had to stop earlier. Still, we didn't consider the games that were too short. We only went above a certain threshold and considered those games. And we filtered them even further. And I will show that. Now, in this case, the distribution of the games played was, again, very different. So we had a few games that were played more than other. So catch and juggle are among the ones that were played the most, but there are other games in the top 6-7, while for, I don't know, seasons, for instance, or flight control, you see there are only a few patients that played a few sessions of the game. We again had a distribution by subject. So some patients played more games than others. Well, again, this is normal because some are really willing to do this, while others were not that keen on practicing every day or having multiple sessions per day. And this is the conditions they had. So they had hemiparesis, stroke, and stroke. And we've got more data from patients with stroke. So those with stroke played more sessions. And again, this is how the data looks like. Is a set of 3-time series for each joint. But this again is same as in the previous setup we collected. It's just that I'm putting the plots in this case. So, well, then the name you see on each box plot is the joint name, and you see X, Y, and Z for each of the joints. Now you see some of them have really dynamic behavior, while some of the joints are having a straight line, so they're not really moving that much. And this is absolutely normal, and maybe because that particular side of the body was not involved in the movement, and it's absolutely natural. You don't need to move if it's not required. But some are moving, or some parts of the body are moving even if they are not required to move, because again, in some cases, the patient maybe cannot execute a certain movement, and then they try to compensate. So for instance, if you need to lift your arm, but you can't because it's painful, your shoulder is painful, maybe you can compensate and you do like this with the whole body. So you move other body joints which are irrelevant for that movement, but the patient moved because that was the best way they could perform the movement. Now, in this case, as I said, we've got various variables that quantify the execution of the game. So one of them was a score associated with a game. And that's what you saw in the Easy the Bee, they collect some points if they do a certain movement. So in the end, there is normalization of these points collected with respect to the size of the duration of the game and so on. Another parameter was the range of movement. We haven't looked at that yet, but they have all kinds of acceleration, deceleration, range of movement, and so on. We only looked, in fact, it's only a preliminary analysis, what I'm showing here. So we only looked at the score of the game, and we tried to see if we identify any patterns in the data that could be associated with the score of the game. We've only used CNNs in this case. I have some students working now on the data, and we plan to use recurrent neural networks as well, because it's again time series data. It might make sense, especially as it's a game and they might be linked. So maybe some patterns in the behavior could be linked with the overall performance. So as I said, we only have the CNN, and we have this. Don't try to read this diagram. It doesn't make sense at this point. But the only thing I want to say is that we looked at we did 4 levels in the analysis. So one was looking at the model and define the model parameters. The second one was to do some data preparation. And I will say in a minute why we needed data preparation. Then we did some modeling preparation, like, I don't know, normalizing any data, finding subsets of movements or filtering the movements and so on. And then the fourth one is really running the experiments. So if we look at a patient, for instance, playing a game, so if the game is Jagger and the patient is 3085, again, if you go to the table, to the initial table, you can see a connection. You will notice that the number of frames, whatever you see in this graph here, is the number of frames for each game played. So this patient plays 75 games, and it has a variable number of frames. The maximum number of frames is 5,397, and the minimum number of frames is 3,184. So it's quite a huge difference. So some games recorded some sessions recorded for the game Jagger for this patient are nearly double the time the other ones. And this is why we again had to do something to pre-process the data. Again, make the sessions longer or shorter, or really ignore some of them who don't have enough number of frames played. Again, we use the same camera with the same frame frequency, so 30 frames per minute. Now, in the data modeling approach, one of the 4 items in that complex diagram, we looked at 2 things. One was the number of frames, and one was the score of the game. So when we look at the number of frames, we could either consider all the games, regardless of the number of frames, or we could include an additional parameter that will say that games that have a number of frames below a certain threshold will be ignored. Even if we ignore again the games below a certain threshold, we still have to equalize the remaining ones. But again, as I said, if one game has 6,000 frames and another one 3,000, you nearly need to double the shortest one, which may alter the data so much. So because you're adding so many points. Now, score of the game. You might think why this is a problem, because for some of the games, the score was very high. And that was very high because the patient was trying to do anything to collect points just to get a good score, ignoring the movement and the correctness of the gesture executed. So if they are supposed to only lift the arm like this, they only have to do that. But if they played just to collect points and were just moving regardless of the quality of the movement, just to collect points, then they got a very high score, which was far above the average or the median of all the other scores we've got for other patients and for the same patients playing the same game. So we looked at another parameter to include, so that we have a cutoff point for the score, just so that it's not an outlier. So again, as I said, we tried for all the data with all the scores, and we've also reduced the data by considering a certain quantile. For instance, 70% of the games that have a normal distribution for the score. Now, this is the CNN framework. So we had, again, we had a few layers, a few CNN layers, dropout layer, pooling layers. This is just the building blocks again, as I said. So, and I'm saying the building blocks because you see pooling layer and additional CNN layers, but in fact, the architecture that got the best results was one using a pooling layer after each convolutional layer. But we had convolutional layers, dropout layers, pooling layers, obviously fully connected layers and dense layers. We use the Adam optimizer and the ReLU activation function for all of them. But now we played for this network architecture with various other hyperparameters like filter sizes, number of filters, batch size, number of epochs, and all of these. And this was part of the experiments we set up. So we set up two types of experiments. One was to model parameters and hyperparameters, to tune the model hyperparameters and parameters. And then the second experiment we want was how we do testing and how we do validation, or when we train, or which model will be the best. So the results I'm going to show have the following structure. So we looked at one of the patients that got lots of games played for a certain game, and we were trying to use that one to improve the performance of our algorithm. So, for instance, we looked at one patient who had, I think, 76 sessions played for a game, and we tried to make our model work well for that patient and those games. But instead of relying just on that, at the same time, we had 3 other patients playing another game, and I will show you that, who were kind of validated for the findings we had for one of the patients. Again, as I said, it's just preliminary. We could have a lot of other setups for whichever we use for training and for getting the best results, which gesture, which game, which patient, and so on. So, but when we looked at parameter tuning, obviously we try removing some of the data. And as I said, we could consider all the data, or we could remove some of the frames some of the games that are too short. Then either for the whole data or for the data we selected, we tried the network with various types of pooling, with max pooling and average pooling. Surprisingly, average pooling worked better than max pooling. And it could be because, being a time series data, was not interested in picking up any peaks, so maybe was interested in picking up anything in the median. Pooling size of 2 was working best, so we tried 2, 3, 4, but the standard 2 was the best one. We tried various filter sizes, and we tried various types of filter, and we tried various kernel size. So again, you can just think of setting up experiments and just running with all these types of parameters and getting the best one. So we try to get the best architecture for one patient, one game, and test it on other patients, other games. And then once we get the best results, we can extend and apply that model to predict other patient, other games. So we've done the training on this patient 3085 and the game Jugger, for which he played 76 sessions. But at the same time, we looked at these 3 other patients and another game, Catch. So whatever we got for 385, we try to validate whatever architecture we go for the CNN, we try to see if it still gets the best results for these other patients. And then now you can expect a variety of experiments we had, because we had a variety of parameters there. I will quickly go through these slides and I will just show you how they gradually improved. So initially, some of the setups were not at all good, but towards the end, we managed to get better results. So we had 4 experiments set up, and for the 4th one of the settings in the 4th one, we've got the best approximation, or the best error. And this was validated for the other 3 that played the game catch. So this was obtained for the patient playing the game jugger, because we have 76 sessions for that. But this was also validated for the other 3 ones. So the other 3 patients playing the game catch. So after a number of experiments, we were kind of happy with this one. Obviously, a lot more experiments and a lot more architectures could be considered, but we just stopped at this case just to see now how we go further. Now is the second part, how we consider, or how we what to output, or how to validate, how to test, how to validate. Now there are various ways in which you consider. We have that architecture. We can still maybe fine-tune the parameters. But how? Shall we take all the patients that play a certain game and improve that for that certain game, and then apply to all the patients playing all the other games? Shall we train on some of the patients playing a game and test on other patients playing the same game? Shall we consider, and this they all come here, shall we group the patients based on the limbs they used in playing a certain game? So for instance, we do all the games that include upper side of the body. We train on a subset of them, test on another subset, but just for upper limbs. And then we do the same thing for lower limbs and so on. So there are lots of ways in which you could look at this data. Again, as I said, we've done some experiments, not everything, we didn't cover everything. And what we find was that building a model that includes all the patients playing a game and then using that to predict the performance on another game doesn't work very well. If we restrict the training to one patient playing one game and then predict their score on other games, works better. So at the patient level, rather than games level, works better. So you could train on a patient rather than a game from these 2 experiments. Again, when we done the experiments, the ones we said, the model worked well for each patient playing all games or a group of games. When we grouped games that utilize the same joints, we didn't get better results. So there wasn't a good idea to look at. But still, this is not what we want. So we have to have the method that a method that is general enough, so that given a number of games, at least, and a number of patients, you could predict the performance of another new patient on a certain game. So at the moment, as I said, it's good at predicting for the same patient, same game, or same patient, some other games, but not all the games. So it's still, still a lot of work to do. But the way in which you could do these experiments is really, is really challenging. So is what we do now, we still try to investigate more CNN architectures. We haven't applied RNN so far. We've tried matrix profile, and I'm going to show you in another slide what that means. What we could use is to select the significant joints that are involved in a movement. At the moment, we're using all the joints. Some are irrelevant because we're only looking at, I don't know, the front flexion or shoulder abduction or so. Maybe the joints we have for legs are irrelevant here, but we still consider them, which makes, so there are some features that are irrelevant in this. And obviously using different training and testing strategies, as I said, we've tried some of them, but not sure which ones are the best ones yet. The matrix profile, as I mentioned, is something very interesting. So it's a method, it's kind of a new method. And what it does is very good for time series data. What it does, it looks for motifs of a certain size in the time series and try to see any repetition of those motifs. Now, it's a bit time consuming because you need to try with various sizes for the motifs. You won't know which size is best to cover a certain area. But we've just done some preliminary work with it. And you could see the color in the graph is actually a motif. So if you look for blue segments, that is a blue motif that is found in the data. We still haven't explored this very much yet. But what we try to do now is to look from statistical perspective. So we've got some statisticians on board for really designing the experiments, because it is so challenging and you just keep on trying, and these methods are so time consuming. You just keep on running these algorithms for hours and hours, and then you just come up with a line in your conclusion that it either works or it doesn't, or it might work but might require some additional steps or something else. So we're trying now to do statistical design of the experiment, see what would be important to have as a backbone, and then how to move from there in a more efficient and more optimized way. But yeah, this is in short what I wanted to explore today. As I said, it's just some preliminary findings, and there's still a lot of work to be done. Thank you for listening. I have to say thank you to my group that worked on this, two of my postdoc students and a postgraduate student. At the moment, there are still two postgraduate students working on this data, but as I said, it's challenging, and there's so much that could be done, not just in finding something for the data, but in general for having a framework that could be applied to this, whoever has this type of data, when different patients, different games, it could be translated to anything, as Heru said, in finance, for instance, could be different customers, different behavior, different things for which you want to find something that could be applied to any newcomers. So in which way you train when you have multiple tasks, multiple players or multiple subjects doing these tasks, and you want a model when a new comer comes, you would be able to predict for that person, I don't know, with the right accuracy. But yeah, thank you so much. Hopefully it was not too boring in the afternoon. I like to give talks in the morning because people are fresh and they can listen and concentrate better. I'm happy if you have any questions or anything to discuss. I am happy to consider.
Okay, thank you very much, Crina. Is there any question from the audience? I think so. We have a question on the chat box by Professor Aniati. She might would like to know more about the second research question to optimize the data. Maybe you can elaborate more on that one.
So is that your algorithms have
on the second research question to optimize data? She would like to know about this more.
Which optimize? I can't see in the Q&A. Is it in the Q&A?
No, in the chat box. In the chat box.
Oh, in the chat box. Oh.
Maybe you can elaborate about the optimizing the data.
There's one in Q&A as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me go to the chat. The second research question to optimize the data.
Yes, about the data optimization.
To optimize in the sense, but make it so the transforming the original data. You mean for for the machine learning method?
Is that what you mean, Bu Aniati?
Yeah, I have. I'm not quite understand with your second research questions, which say that you use several algorithms and optimize the data. You mean that several algorithm is K?
The second research question. Oh, you mean for the first data set?
Yeah. The second research questions.
Yeah, I will go there. Oh, I think it's yeah, no.
I think in the front, I think.
Still in the beginning. No, this. You skip it.
Okay. How to identify the most suitable? Is it this one?
Yeah. How to identify the most suitable
optimize
algorithm and optimize it for our data and other.
Yeah. So what I meant here is to identify, I don't know, is it CNNs or RNNs or so? So if we know it's CNNs, that works best, then let's optimize it. Optimize, I mean, optimizing the architecture, finding the right architecture, or the best possible, or the best possible architecture in a number of experiments that we try.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there any question from the audience? Okay, let's see. Is that you are going to have a new network architecture?
So you're asking if it's our own algorithm. Well, the one for this first problem I presented for the action correctness is available on GitHub. I can send you the link to that. We have a paper published for a data mining conference on this. So if you just drop me an email and I can link you to, by the way, I haven't put my email anywhere, but it's my first last name at brunel.ac.uk. Or if you just search for my name, you will come to Brunel and get the email from there. But yes, so the source code we had for the first one is available, and if you think it's useful for you, you can take it and play with it and improve it. And as I said, there is data available, so it's not just our data. It's still we still have some minor revision with the paper to get it published because they ask for so many things when you want to publish data. It's really difficult to publish data. But then once you publish it, you get a lot of citations because there will be a lot of people using it. But it's our data, and I can send you the link to it because, as I said, will be soon be available. And there are 2 other data sets and our algorithm. So if you want to play, it's a good idea for a PhD. So if you want to play, there's a lot to play, and it's a very good topic. Yeah. So and you can improve the algorithms. You can work on even on, I don't know, the input data. Just how you present the data to the algorithm, which is the best way to make it either equal or consider it the way it is. So there's a lot you could do with it. Yeah. So if you drop me an email, I can send you the links.
So in one of the question in the question and answer box, she asked whether is it good to modify the CNN network? Is it possible?
It's a good idea to modify it, yes, if you have enough resources to run experiments.
Okay, I see.
They're kind of time consuming, and it's also because the data is complex.
Oh, I see.
But there's plenty of work that could be there.
Okay, any other question from the audience? Okay, Baginda, you can ask the question directly to Krishna. Okay. Hello, Baginda. Maybe I would like to some question since this is about the exercise games. So exercise game and patient. So one of our question is that since patients are playing game, maybe we would like to know whether in the patient you group the patient into children, adults, and old patients. And then also we would like to know whether the games also have some good impact on the condition of the patient. And then also,
very good question.
Is there any pattern of the movement of the game on the type of the patient?
I'm not that I'm aware. We haven't grouped the patient by condition. That could be one idea. And that goes to my final ideas on how to set up train and test. So that could be good to train on something and test on something else. Also, for the second data I presented, I mentioned that they played sessions over a period of 2 months. We haven't looked at the time connection. So we haven't taken a patient to see the sessions played at the beginning compared to the ones played at the end. That's again something to look into. Or even all the patients at the same time point. Or even per condition, as you said, if they get certification from the physiotherapist that their ability is, 40% for a set arm. So group them per their ability within some ranges. These patients could only use half of their abilities for their arm, or they could use 70%, or they could use 20%, 25%. That could be another thing to consider.
Okay. But do you also record the patient opinion about the games?
They were quite satisfied.
Oh, they were. That's good. Yeah.
But they tend to have a preference for one or the other.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
That's why they played some more sessions, and then maybe to do with the fact that they could move easily some sides compared to some other sides. So there's a lot to look into. There are a lot of ideas, and thanks for asking those questions.
Is it difficult for you to get the patient data?
It is. It's a very difficult process because they need all kinds of approvals. First, you need the consent of the patient participating in the study. Then you need to get all kinds of approval that is not invasive. We also tried to have some sensors, some wearable sensors for the upper limb, for instance. You could use sensors, but they were so difficult. We got approval for that finally, but we haven't got the data yet. But it was so difficult to prove that those sensors are non-invasive, and they want to. We had to send pictures on how they would be attached and what happens, and it was really difficult. So anything to do with patients is. We have some more data. We haven't started working yet with that. From some children who have cerebral palsy, so they really they were born like that. All this you saw here were normal at some point in their life, but they had an accident or something that left them with a disability. But we got some children which were born with a disability, so they don't know how it is to be normal. Any other ones, the ones in these studies, know what a correct movement is, but these children, they don't know. So with them, we only have some data. Again, we haven't done much analysis with that. Happy to collaborate, as I said, with anyone there. What they have sensors. So they have, I think, 2 sensors on each arm. Or one sensor, I can't remember now. But what they have to do is a single action. They need to use one hand, open a box, and press a button with the other hand. One of their hands is affected. So when they open with the healthy hand, then the movement they have with the affected one is kind of strange because that's how they move. And it's very different for each of these children because they're all different. When they open the box with the affected hand, absolutely different again because they can't use that hand. So they opened in a very strange way, and at the same time they move the other hand, which they're not supposed to, because when you open a box with hand, you don't move the other hand, but they try to, help with the good hand. So that data is again something to look into, more for patterns. And then group the children based on their age, maybe their condition, the way they did these 2 movements. And that data is kind of simpler, but simpler in the sense because they only have two sensors, and it's only this three-dimensional data from three sensors and the trajectory to look at, rather than having all the body joints. But it's more complex because these children are so different. So it's very difficult to find the pattern in all of them. You can find maybe patterns in the same child because they repeated the movement many times, but it might be difficult to find, I don't know, if you look at one child who is 5 years old and another one who is 11, and it might be very difficult to find anything similar in the way they...
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
This is meant for designing exercises that could improve. So what they need to do, how can you help them to use the affected arms and limbs to just to cope with the daily life activities.
Right. Okay, any other question from the audience? Basically, our university have two hospital, the one in Jakarta and one in Depok, which is also interesting to get the data.
Oh yeah, see, that would be even I don't know. It might be a collaborative project, but again, might need a lot of approvals to get patients involved.
Okay, right.
But it's interesting. I mean, and especially if you look at a certain condition, you can look at a certain condition only, or you can look at I don't know, certain group of patients. I don't know, all above 80, or these kind of things. But as I said, to me, it's more the data rather than the. It's more looking at the data rather than looking at the. Rather looking at where the data is. So if I get this type of data, regardless of the meaning of this, but I have multiple time series for which I have to find patterns in them, then it's what I need to look at, and I need to find the best and the most appropriate machine learning methods for that. So as I said, could come from anywhere as long as it's similar, maybe could apply to anywhere.
Crina, this is still related to Prof. Suhartanto questions. For one complete study cycle, how many data collection milestone that we need to have sufficient data for the study?
Yeah, so it might be statistically relevant. Say again, now the thing is not the size of the data, but the quality of the data. The trend nowadays is to have good quality data. So rather than having tons of data, having fewer data instances, but of very good quality. It makes absolutely more sense than having lots of data, which is noisy or is not that clean.
I see. Okay, thank you, Crina.
Be most welcome.
Any more question? I think we still have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Before azan. Okay, 2 minutes before azan. This is Indonesian fasting month. I mean, the Ramadan fasting month. In about 2 minutes, we're going to have to break the fasting.
Oh, really? In 2 minutes?
Yeah, in 2 minutes. But anyway, it's a very, very interesting talk. But I will talk to you. I will send you email about my PhD student who is working on the financial risk management. I will send you some paper, and then we would like to get some comment from you.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And anyone in the audience, if you want source code or any of the data here, just feel free to email me.
Okay. I'll send the moderation to Pak Hari again. Thank you again very much from Crina, Grosan. Hopefully we can get in touch in the near future.
Sure. Yeah, I will be happy to.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Heru, for moderating our event today. And once again, thank you so much.
Do we have our picture taken?
Oh, okay.
Oh,
we have.
Yeah, you did.
Okay. So we have already.
Excellent.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Robi. Okay, once again, thank you so much, Dr. Crina Grosan, for your insightful presentation today. Hopefully, we can continue our collaboration in the near future. Also, Prof. Suhartanto mentioned earlier. Okay, thank you also
Thank you so much.
to
Thank you.
Aniati, yeah, to all participants, and see you again in our next event. Yeah. Okay, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a good afternoon and good morning to Crina. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Terima kasih Bu Aniati. Ini ada azan ini. Oke, makasih semuanya ya, Mas Robi, Mas Hamid, Mbak En, Santi.